r/AITA my coworker framed me, so I exposed him at his birthday party. AITA for exposing my coworker's lies at his birthday party? The projector screen flickered to life, and I watched Jake's face drain of color as his own stolen words appeared in 72-point font above the birthday cake. 23 pairs of eyes turned from the screen to him, then to me, confusion rippling through the conference room like a wave. Surprise, I said quietly, my finger hovering over the laptop spacebar. One more click would advance to the next slide, the one with the email timestamps that would destroy him. But let me back up, because I know how this looks. I know standing here in my black dress, having hijacked what was supposed to be a celebration, I probably look unhinged. 3 weeks ago, I would have thought the same thing about someone doing what I'm about to do. 3 weeks ago, I still trusted Jake Morrison. It started in January when our boss Sarah announced the new senior marketing strategist position. Internal candidates only, she'd said, looking directly at me. We want someone who really understands our brand vision. I'd been at Pinnacle Media for 4 years, Jake for 2. The promotion felt like a formality. I threw everything into my campaign pitch for the Henderson Electronics account, late nights, weekend research, 3 different strategy revisions. The digital hearts concept was mine, targeting millennials' nostalgia while positioning Henderson as the emotional tech choice. I'd even trademarked the tagline myself. Jake offered to help with the presentation slides. You're so burned out, he'd said, bringing me coffee at 9 p.m. while I hunched over market research. Let me clean up the formatting so you can focus on the content. He seemed genuinely concerned, staying late to proofread my work. The presentation was scheduled for a Friday. Thursday night, Jake called in sick with food poisoning. Postpone it, he texted. I want to be there to support you. Monday morning, Sarah called me into her office with Jake sitting there, grinning. On her laptop screen was my digital hearts campaign, every detail, every insight, even my handwritten margin notes somehow typed up. Jake's really outdone himself, Sarah beamed. This Henderson pitch is exactly the innovative thinking we need. The emotional positioning, that brilliant tagline, where technology meets heart, it's perfect. I felt the room spin. That's my campaign. Jake's face shifted into practiced confusion. What do you mean? We collaborated on general ideas, sure, but this specific strategy. I have drafts, I said desperately. Timestamps, research files. From when we were brainstorming together, Jake interrupted smoothly. I took our discussions and developed them into this cohesive pitch. I mean, I appreciate your input during our talks, but the actual strategic framework here is mine. Sarah looked between us, her excitement cooling. This is concerning. Jake, can you walk me through your creative process? For 30 minutes, I watched him explain my own ideas back to me, complete with details only I should have known. He'd clearly memorized everything from my files. When Sarah asked about the market research methodology, he even referenced the obscure study I'd found at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'm disappointed in you, Sarah told me after Jake left to prepare for the Henderson meeting. Trying to take credit for a colleague's work is serious. We'll discuss this further after the weekend. Jake got the promotion. I got a formal warning in my HR file and a threat of termination for collaborative issues and potential intellectual property theft. That was 3 weeks ago. Tonight was supposed to be Jake's celebration party, promotion and 28th birthday combined. I clicked to the next slide. The room went completely silent. The slide showed Jake's email to Henderson Electronics, timestamp 6:47 a.m. the Friday I was supposed to present. But that wasn't the damning part. The damning part was the attachment, my original strategy document, complete with my name in the file properties and revision history dating back 3 months. What is this? Sarah's voice cut through the silence like glass. Jake's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His girlfriend Emma, visiting from Sterling Communications, our biggest rival, squeezed his arm. Jake? What's happening? I clicked again. The next slide split the screen, Jake's original presentation on the left, my stolen files on the right. Identical formatting. Identical typos. Including the one where I'd misspelled millennial in slide 12 and corrected it in revision 4. The metadata doesn't lie, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. These files were created on my laptop, using my software license, saved to my cloud drive. The revision history shows 3 months of my work Jake accessed when I gave him my login to fix the formatting. Marketing Director Tom leaned forward. Holy shit, Sarah. Look at the timestamps. But Jake recovered faster than I expected. He stood abruptly, knocking over his beer. This is insane, he said loudly. You're having some kind of breakdown, aren't you? First the false accusations, now this, stalking behavior? Hacking into company systems? A few heads nodded. Jake was popular, charming, bought drinks after work, remembered everyone's birthdays. I was the quiet one who left at 5:30 and brought sad desk salads for lunch. She's been acting erratic for weeks, Jake continued, warming to his theme. Sarah, remember when security called about someone staying in the building all night last Friday? That had been me, searching for evidence. My stomach dropped. And Tom, Jake turned to our director, didn't you mention your office was accessed after hours? Door logs would show. That's enough. Sarah's voice was ice. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling IT and security. Everyone out except. Wait, Emma interrupted, her face pale. Jake, what's digital hearts? The room froze. Even Jake stopped mid-gesture. What? He managed. Emma's phone was in her hand, displaying what looked like a contract. Sterling's been developing a campaign for Morrison Tech, no relation, she added quickly. But Jake, you sent me strategy notes 3 weeks ago. For feedback, you said. Personal project. Her voice got smaller. The emotional positioning angle. The tagline about technology and hearts. I felt my own heart stop. Morrison Tech was Pinnacle's second biggest competitor. Jake's face went white, then red. That's not. Emma, you're confused. I have the emails, Emma said quietly. You asked me to review Henderson Electronics' positioning strategy. Said you were trying to understand their approach for defensive planning. She looked around the room. I thought it was weird that Jake had such detailed intel on their campaign, but I figured. Sarah snatched Emma's phone. Her face transformed as she scrolled through the messages. You sent proprietary client strategy to a competitor, Sarah said slowly. Not just stolen strategy, our client's confidential information. To Sterling Communications. It wasn't like that, Jake started, but Emma was backing away from him. Morrison Tech launched their new campaign yesterday, Emma whispered. It's identical to this. We've been wondering how they knew exactly how to counter Henderson's positioning before it even went public. The conference room erupted in overlapping voices. Someone mentioned FBI investigations. Another person said corporate espionage. Jake's best friend from accounting was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. But all I could think was, this was so much bigger than my stolen promotion. This was a federal crime. The silence that followed Emma's revelation felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. I could practically see the wheels turning in everyone's heads as the magnitude of what Jake had done sank in. Sarah's phone rang, cutting through the tension. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went ashen. It's Henderson Electronics, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She answered with shaking hands. Sarah Chen, Pinnacle Media. Yes, Mr. Henderson. What? Her eyes darted to Jake, then to me. When did this happen? I see. No, we had no idea. The rest of us watched her face cycle through confusion, horror, and what looked like pure panic. When she hung up, her hands were trembling. Henderson Electronics is pulling their contract, she announced to the room. Effective immediately. Morrison Tech launched a preemptive campaign this morning that counters our strategy so perfectly, Henderson's board thinks we leaked it intentionally. Her voice cracked. They're considering legal action for breach of confidentiality. Emma had gone completely pale. Oh my god, Jake. Morrison Tech is Sterling's client. When you sent me those files, I forwarded them to my team for the competitive analysis report. It's standard procedure when we get intel on, she stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. I didn't know it was stolen. I thought you were helping me with legitimate research. This keeps getting better, Tom muttered, running his hands through his hair. So not only did Jake steal internal work and commit corporate espionage, but he manipulated his girlfriend into unknowingly facilitating it. Jake finally found his voice. You're all insane. This is a setup. He pointed at me with a shaking finger, she hacked my email. She created fake evidence. Emma, you know me. I would never. Shut up, Jake. Emma's voice was deadly quiet. Just shut up. She turned to Sarah. I need to call my legal department immediately. Sterling had no knowledge of any impropriety. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation. As Emma stepped into the hallway, her phone already pressed to her ear, I felt a new wave of dread wash over me. Because suddenly I realized something that made my blood run cold. Sarah, I said slowly, how many other campaigns has Jake worked on in the past 2 years? Her eyes widened as the implication hit her. Tom was already pulling up files on his laptop. The Meridian Bank rebrand, Tom said, scrolling through project records. The Coastal Airlines summer campaign. Oh Jesus, the Davidson Pharmaceuticals launch. He looked up. That's 12 major client strategies Jake had access to. Davidson Pharma pulled their contract 6 months ago, Sarah said faintly. Said our strategy felt anticipated by the market. We thought it was bad timing. Coastal Airlines reduced their spend by 60% in Q3, someone from the back of the room added. Claimed our positioning wasn't competitive enough. The room was spinning. I thought I was exposing one stolen promotion. Instead, I'd apparently uncovered a systematic operation that had been bleeding Pinnacle Media for months, maybe longer. Jake was backing toward the door, but marketing assistant Lisa was blocking his path, her phone out and recording. You destroy people's careers, Lisa said, her voice shaking with anger. Jennifer from the Meridian team got fired for underperformance. Carlos took a demotion after the coastal disaster. And what about me? I found myself saying. I was 2 days away from being terminated for supposedly stealing your work. My reputation, my references, I could have been blacklisted from the entire industry. Jake's composure finally cracked completely. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he said desperately. Emma, I swear, I never meant for Sterling to actually use. Stop talking, Emma called from the hallway, her hand over her phone. Jake, for the love of God, stop talking. My legal team says anything you say right now can be used in court. Court. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah's phone buzzed with another call. Then Tom's. Then 3 more phones around the room lit up simultaneously. Word was already getting out. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Sarah fielded 3 more calls while Tom tried to pull together a comprehensive list of compromised campaigns. Jake stood frozen in the corner like a deer in headlights, and I found myself in the surreal position of being the whistleblower in what was rapidly becoming the biggest corporate scandal in Pinnacle's 15-year history. Then Emma walked back in, and everything got worse. Sterling's general counsel wants to speak with Pinnacle's leadership immediately, she announced, her face pale but professional. They're flying someone out tonight. Jake, she couldn't even look at him. They're also sending someone to retrieve all company devices from my apartment. Anything you might have had access to. Emma, please. Don't. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I've been working toward partner track for 3 years. 3 years, Jake. Do you have any idea what this could do to my career? Jake's best friend Marcus finally spoke up from where he'd been sitting in stunned silence. Dude, what the hell? When you asked to borrow my keycard last month because you forgot yours, were you? What keycard? Sarah whipped around to face Marcus. After hours building access, Marcus said slowly, the implications dawning on him. Jake said his was demagnetized and security was closed. I thought he was just picking up files he forgot. Tom was already pulling up security logs on his laptop. October 15th, Marcus's keycard, 11:47 p.m. October 22nd, 1:23 a.m. November 3rd, Jesus, Jake, there are 17 entries. 17 times, Sarah repeated, her voice hollow. 17 times you accessed the building after hours with fraudulent credentials. I felt sick. 17 times Jake had been wandering around the office alone, with access to everyone's computers, files, research. How many people's work had he stolen? How many careers had he destroyed? There's more, Tom said grimly, still scrolling through data. These dates correspond with every major strategy upload to our shared drives. Jake wasn't just taking finished work, he was monitoring our progress in real time. Lisa gasped. That's why Morrison Tech's responses were always so perfectly timed. They weren't just countering our strategies, they were anticipating our development process. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Holy shit, are you the Pinnacle whistleblower? It's all over LinkedIn already. LinkedIn? I grabbed my phone and searched Pinnacle Media. The top result made my stomach drop. Breaking. Corporate espionage scandal rocks marketing firm as employee exposes systematic client data theft. The article already had 847 shares. We're trending, I announced weakly to the room. Sarah looked like she might vomit. The partners are going to kill me. Our insurance won't cover intentional criminal acts. If we lose more clients over this. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Pinnacle Media employed 43 people. If the scandal destroyed the company, 42 innocent people would lose their jobs because of Jake's greed. That's when Jake finally tried to run. He bolted for the conference room door, but Marcus grabbed his arm. Where are you going, man? I need air, Jake said frantically. I need to think. Emma, can we please just talk privately? I can explain everything. The only place you're going is to HR to surrender your company devices, Sarah said firmly. And then you're going home to wait for our lawyers to call. You can't keep me here, Jake protested. I haven't been formally accused of anything. Tom snorted. You want formal? Fine. I'm formally accusing you of theft of proprietary information, unauthorized access to computer systems, corporate espionage, and fraud. How's that for formal? Emma stepped forward, and for a moment I thought she might defend him. Instead, she pulled off the promise ring Jake had given her 2 months ago and set it on the conference table. We're done, she said simply. I'm staying at my sister's tonight. Don't contact me. Jake stared at the ring like it was a bomb that had just gone off in his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes, but I found I couldn't summon any sympathy. Because my phone was buzzing with messages from former colleagues at other companies, all asking the same question, is this really just the beginning? The messages kept pouring in, each one making my stomach sink deeper. Jennifer Martinez from my old internship, girl, Morrison Tech tried to recruit me last month with info that sounded exactly like Pinnacle strategies. David Chen from the advertising conference circuit, Jake Morrison reached out 6 months ago asking weird questions about our client roster. I looked up from my phone to find everyone staring at me. This isn't just about Pinnacle clients, I said, my voice barely steady. Other companies are saying Jake contacted them too. Sarah's face went gray. What kind of contacts? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number, but somehow I knew I had to take it. Hello? Is this the woman who exposed Jake Morrison? The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. Yes. Who is this? Patricia Vance, senior partner at Kellerman and Associates. We represent Morrison Tech. We need to talk immediately. The conference room went dead silent. I put the call on speaker with shaking hands. Ms. Vance, this is Sarah Chen, managing director at Pinnacle Media. Are you calling to discuss legal action? A pause. Actually, we're calling because Morrison Tech may be as much a victim as you are. We've been conducting an internal investigation for weeks after several competitors seemed to anticipate our strategies with impossible accuracy. When your story broke online an hour ago, pieces started falling into place. Jake, who had been standing frozen by the door, suddenly looked like he might collapse. What kind of pieces? Tom asked. Jake Morrison contacted our marketing director 8 months ago, claiming to be conducting industry research for a graduate thesis. He was very convincing, had Pinnacle credentials, seemed knowledgeable about marketing trends. Our team answered what they thought were academic questions about competitive positioning. My blood went cold. He was playing both sides. It appears so. But here's what's truly concerning, we've now identified similar research outreach to at least 12 major companies in the region. All from Jake Morrison. All using his Pinnacle credentials as legitimacy. The room erupted in horrified murmurs. Jake wasn't just stealing from Pinnacle and feeding information to Morrison Tech through Emma. He was running a comprehensive intelligence operation, using our company's reputation to extract secrets from our competitors, then selling insights in all directions. There's more, Patricia continued grimly. We believe someone's been aggregating this intelligence and selling it to a broader network. Morrison Tech received several anonymous strategic reports over the past year, reports that contained information no single source could have provided. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face pale. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Jake asked me to introduce him to contacts at 3 other agencies. Said he was thinking about switching firms and wanted to network. I set up coffee meetings. Which agencies? Sarah demanded. Brightwater Creative, Apex Strategic, and... Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. Kellerman and Associates. Patricia's voice came through the speaker sharp as a blade. Jake Morrison met with our strategy director 6 weeks ago. Claimed he was exploring partnership opportunities between Pinnacle and our clients. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Jake hadn't just been stealing, he'd been building a network, using all of us as unwitting accomplices. Emma's contacts, Marcus's keycard, my login credentials, Sarah's trust. He'd weaponized every relationship, every professional courtesy, every small favor. How much information are we talking about? Tom asked, though he sounded like he dreaded the answer. Based on our preliminary analysis? Strategy documents covering approximately 40 major accounts across 7 agencies, with a combined media spend of roughly $80 million. $80 million. The number hung in the air like toxic smoke. This wasn't a workplace theft anymore, this was organized financial crime on a massive scale. Jake finally spoke, his voice cracking. I never meant for it to become so big. It started small, just trying to get ahead, but then people kept asking for more information, and the money was... Money? Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. What money, Jake? But Jake had said too much. He looked around the room like a trapped animal, then bolted for the door again. This time, nobody tried to stop him. We let him run, because we all understood the same terrible truth: Jake Morrison wasn't just a thief. He was the center of a corporate espionage ring that was about to bring down everyone he'd ever worked with. Jake made it exactly 37 steps down the hallway before building security intercepted him. I watched through the conference room's glass walls as two guards flanked him near the elevators, their hands raised in a please cooperate gesture that somehow looked more threatening than if they'd tackled him outright. Well, that's not suspicious at all, Lisa muttered, but her sarcasm felt forced. We were all thinking the same thing: people don't run unless they're guilty of something much worse than what's already been discovered. My phone buzzed again. Then again. The LinkedIn article had exploded to over 3,000 shares, and my notifications were becoming a steady stream of reporters, former colleagues, and complete strangers wanting statements, interviews, or just to gawk at the train wreck. But it was the text from my landlord that made my blood freeze. Saw the news. Hope this doesn't affect rent situation. Call me. The rent situation. Because I'd been so focused on clearing my name that I'd forgotten the most immediate consequence of Jake's sabotage. I was still officially on probation at Pinnacle. My job was hanging by a thread, and now the whole company might be facing criminal investigation. Sarah, I said carefully, what happens to employees under review if the company faces legal action? Her expression told me everything I needed to know. HR will want to minimize liability. Anyone with any connection to this situation will likely be suspended pending investigation, Tom finished grimly. Standard protocol. Even victims. Even victims. The words hit me like a slap. I'd risked everything to expose Jake's crimes, and now I might lose my job anyway because I was too close to the scandal. The whistleblower protection laws everyone talks about? Apparently they don't help much when your entire industry is about to treat you like toxic waste. There's something else, Emma said from the doorway, her phone pressed to her ear. She'd been on back-to-back calls with Sterling's legal team for the past 20 minutes. My company's doing damage control. They're releasing a statement tonight denying any knowledge of Jake's activities, but... She trailed off, looking sick. But what? Sarah prompted. They're also announcing an internal investigation into all Sterling employees who had contact with Pinnacle personnel in the past year. Emma's voice was barely audible. That includes me. I'm being placed on administrative leave. The dominoes were falling faster now. Emma, who'd done nothing wrong except date the wrong person and try to help with what she thought was legitimate research. Me, who'd been the victim before becoming the whistleblower. How many other innocent people were about to get crushed by Jake's expanding web of lies? Patricia Vance's voice crackled through the speaker again. I'm still on the line, and I need everyone to understand something. This investigation is going to reach every person Jake Morrison had professional contact with over the past 2 years. The FBI's white-collar crime unit is already being briefed. FBI. The word landed like a bomb in the conference room. This had officially moved beyond corporate discipline into federal criminal territory. What does that mean for us? Marcus asked, his voice tight with panic. I mean, for people who didn't know anything? It means you'll all need lawyers, Patricia said bluntly. Even innocent parties will face questioning. Your computers, phones, emails, everything will be subject to forensic analysis. And given the scope of what we're uncovering, this investigation could take months. Months. I thought about my savings account, the one that could maybe cover 2 months of rent if I lived on ramen and canceled every subscription. I thought about trying to find a new job while under federal investigation, trying to explain to potential employers why my last workplace had imploded in a national scandal. Sarah's phone rang again, and this time she didn't bother with pleasantries. Sarah Chen. Yes, I saw the LinkedIn post. No, we're not giving statements to press until we've consulted with counsel. What do you mean, other victims? Her face went white as she listened. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. That was Channel 7 News, she said slowly. They'd been contacted by employees from 6 different companies, all claiming Jake Morrison reached out to them for research or networking over the past 18 months. The conference room felt like it was shrinking. 6 companies. How many people had Jake manipulated? How many careers was he about to destroy as collateral damage? And suddenly I realized the most terrifying thing of all. I thought exposing Jake would end this nightmare. Instead, I just fired the opening shot in what was about to become an industry-wide war. The security footage from Jake's attempted escape was already being uploaded to the company servers when my phone rang with a number I recognized but desperately didn't want to answer. Mom, I can't talk right now. Honey, your father just got off the phone with his cousin at the Tribune. They're running a story about corporate espionage and your name is mentioned. Her voice had that particular pitch that meant she was trying not to panic but failing spectacularly. Please tell me you're not in trouble. In trouble. I almost laughed, but it came out as more of a choke. It's complicated, Mom. I'm the one who exposed the wrongdoing, but you're all over the internet looking like you had a nervous breakdown at some man's birthday party, she interrupted. The photos, sweetheart. Someone recorded everything. My stomach dropped. I'd been so focused on the legal implications that I'd forgotten about the 23 witnesses with smartphones. What photos? You haven't seen them? Oh, honey. She trailed off in a way that made my skin crawl. I fumbled with my phone, pulling up Twitter while Patricia Vance continued outlining federal investigation procedures in the background. The hashtag Pinnacle scandal was trending, and the top video had already been viewed 127,000 times. There I was, frozen mid-presentation in my black dress, looking every inch the unhinged employee having a public breakdown. The caption read, Psycho Coworker destroys innocent man's birthday with fake evidence. This is why you don't stick your D*** in crazy #corporate drama #toxic. The video doesn't show the proof, I whispered, watching myself gesture at slides that weren't visible in the phone footage. It just shows me making accusations. To anyone watching without context, I looked like exactly what Jake had tried to paint me as, an unstable woman having a very public meltdown, destroying a celebration with wild conspiracy theories. The comments were brutal. Imagine being so jealous of a coworker's success that you crash their party with PowerPoints. This woman needs therapy, not a platform. Hope they fired her immediately. But scattered between the mockery were a few comments that made my blood freeze. Wait, isn't this the same company my friend works for? She mentioned some guy asking weird questions about their client strategies. And Morrison Tech tried to poach me last year with info that was suspiciously specific. Now I'm wondering. The story's bigger than the photos, I told my mom, trying to keep my voice steady. But right now it looks like I'm the villain. Well, fix it, she said with a kind of maternal confidence that suggested public relations crises could be resolved through proper planning and maybe a casserole. Call that nice reporter who did the piece on your college scholarship. Explain your side. Explain my side to a reporter. While under federal investigation. While my company faced potential criminal charges. While Jake's spy network unraveled across the entire marketing industry. Mom, I have to go. Don't talk to any journalists, okay? This is about to get much worse before it gets better. I hung up as Sarah waved me over to where she was huddled with Tom, both of them staring at his laptop screen with expressions of pure horror. What now? I asked, though I was starting to dread the answer to that question. Jake's LinkedIn profile, Tom said quietly. Look at his employment history. I leaned over his shoulder and felt the room tilt. Jake's profile showed the standard Pinnacle Media position, but there was a second listing I'd never noticed, freelance marketing consultant, 2019 present. Specializing in competitive intelligence and strategic analysis. He's been advertising himself as a corporate spy, I said weakly. For 3 years. It gets worse, Sarah added, scrolling down to Jake's connections. Look who's in his network. The list read like a who's who of marketing executives across the region. Directors at agencies we'd never heard of. VPs at Fortune 500 companies. Even a few names I recognized from government contracting firms. Jake Morrison hadn't just been stealing from Pinnacle and feeding information to a few competitors. He'd been running a professional espionage business, and we'd all been his unwitting employees. Tom's finger hovered over Jake's contact list, and I watched his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and something that looked like genuine fear. There are government contractors on here, he said quietly. Defense companies. Healthcare systems. The implications hit me like ice water. This wasn't just marketing espionage anymore. Jake had been networking with people who handled classified information, medical data, infrastructure security. If he'd been selling intelligence to the wrong buyers. We need to stop looking at this, Sarah said suddenly, closing the laptop. Right now. If this involves national security or protected health information, we could be charged with obstruction just for reviewing evidence. But it was too late. Emma had been watching over our shoulders, and her face had gone ash gray. Jake asked me about Sterling's government contracts last month, she whispered. Said he was curious about public sector marketing. I told him about our Department of Energy campaign, thought it was just normal industry talk. The conference room went dead silent except for the sound of Patricia Vance still talking through my phone speaker about federal procedures. I realized she couldn't hear our side conversation about Jake's expanded client list, and part of me wondered if that was for the better. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown DC area code. Then Tom's phone. Then Sarah's. All unknown numbers, all calling simultaneously. Sarah answered first. Pinnacle Media. Yes, she's here. I'm sorry, what agency did you say you were with? She put the call on hold and turned to me with eyes wide as saucers. Department of Justice. They want to speak with you directly. Me? My voice came out as a croak. Why me specifically? Because apparently you're not just a whistleblower anymore, Tom said, staring at his own phone. According to this voicemail, you're now a protected witness in a federal investigation. Protected witness. The words should have been reassuring, but they felt like a death sentence for any hope of returning to normal life. Protected witnesses didn't get to quietly go back to their marketing coordinator jobs and pretend nothing happened. Emma's phone rang, and she answered without checking the number. Hello? What? No, absolutely not. I'm not commenting for any article. She hung up and turned to us. Washington Post. They're writing a story about corporate espionage in the defense contracting supply chain. Apparently Jake's little business has tentacles in places that could affect national security. The Washington Post. My small-scale workplace revenge had apparently just become a national news story involving federal agencies I'd never heard of. I need to get out of here, I said, standing up abruptly. Before more reporters show up, before more federal agents call. I need to think. You can't leave, Sarah said firmly. The DOJ wants to interview you tonight. Here. And they're sending agents to secure the building. Secure the building. Like we were a crime scene. What about Jake? Marcus asked. Is he still in the building? Tom checked his security app. No. They released him an hour ago. Apparently building security doesn't have authority to detain someone without formal charges. So Jake was out there somewhere, knowing that his entire network was about to be exposed, knowing that federal investigators were closing in. A man with nothing left to lose and 3 years' worth of classified intelligence in his head. My phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. It was Jake. I stared at Jake's name on my screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. Around me, the conference room had gone completely silent, everyone watching as my phone buzzed insistently in my hand. Don't answer it, Sarah said sharply. If DOJ is involved, any conversation with Jake could be considered witness tampering. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the look of genuine terror I'd seen in his eyes before he ran, or maybe I just needed to understand how someone I trusted could have destroyed so many lives so systematically. I answered and put it on speaker. Jake? His voice was shaky, barely recognizable. I need you to know I never meant for it to go this far. When I started this, it was just supposed to be small-scale competitive research. A little extra money on the side. A little extra money? Tom's voice cut through the phone like a blade. Jake, you destroyed people's careers. You committed federal crimes. Tom? Jesus, how many people are listening to this? Jake's breathing was rapid, panicked. Look, I'm calling because they're going to try to make this look like some massive conspiracy, but it wasn't organized like that. It just grew. Grew? Emma's voice was ice-cold fury. You used me to commit corporate espionage. You turned me into an unwitting accomplice in federal crimes. Em, please, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months? That you destroyed my career because you were too greedy and too cowardly to succeed on your own merit? There was a long pause. When Jake spoke again, his voice had changed, less panicked, more calculating. You all need to be very careful about what you say to federal investigators. Because if they dig deep enough, they're going to find things that implicate a lot of innocent people. My blood went cold. What do you mean? I mean, I wasn't working alone, and I wasn't the one calling the shots. You think a marketing coordinator could build a network spanning 7 agencies and government contractors? You think I had the connections to set up buyers for classified intelligence? Sarah grabbed my phone. Jake, if you're suggesting there are others involved, you need to turn yourself in and cooperate with authorities. Making veiled threats isn't going to. I'm not making threats, Jake interrupted. I'm trying to warn you. The people I was reporting to don't like loose ends. And right now, everyone in that room just became a loose end. The conference room erupted in voices, but I couldn't focus on what anyone was saying because my mind was reeling. Jake wasn't the mastermind, he was a middle manager in someone else's operation. Which meant somewhere out there, people with real power and resources had just watched their entire network get exposed on social media. Who were you working for? I demanded. I can't. Look, just be careful, okay? All of you. Don't go anywhere alone, don't. The line went dead. We sat in stunned silence for about 30 seconds before Tom's phone exploded with an emergency alert, security breach, Pinnacle Media Building. All personnel evacuate immediately. Through the conference room windows, I could see unmarked black SUVs pulling into the parking lot, too many of them, moving too fast, with a kind of coordination that screamed federal task force. That's not DOJ coming to interview witnesses, Emma said, her voice tight with fear. That's a raid. Sarah was already grabbing files from the table. Everyone out. Now. Emergency stairs, not elevators. But as we rushed toward the door, Marcus grabbed my arm. Wait, he said, pointing at his laptop screen. Jake's LinkedIn profile, look. I glanced back and felt my stomach drop. Jake's entire professional history had been scrubbed. No employment records, no connections, no trace that he'd ever worked anywhere. Someone with serious technical resources was already cleaning up the evidence trail. And we were about to walk into a federal investigation where we might be the only people left who could prove any of this had happened at all. The emergency stairwell echoed with our footsteps as we descended, but halfway down I realized we were making a terrible mistake. Stop, I hissed, grabbing Sarah's arm. We can't just walk out there. If Jake was telling the truth about working for someone else, leaving together makes us look like conspirators fleeing the scene. Through the stairwell window, I could see more vehicles arriving, news vans mixing with the federal SUVs, creating a media circus in the parking lot. Reporters were already setting up cameras, and I spotted at least 3 drones hovering overhead. She's right, Emma said, her face pale. Sterling's legal team told me to avoid any appearance of coordination with Pinnacle personnel. If we're photographed leaving together during a federal raid. Tom pulled out his phone and cursed. Too late. Look at this. The screen showed a live news feed, federal agents raid marketing firm in corporate espionage scandal. The footage clearly showed our cars in the parking lot, and the cheer-in at the bottom read employees still inside during FBI operation. FBI? Marcus's voice cracked. When did this become FBI? Before anyone could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number, but this time I was expecting it. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Agent Patricia Chen with the Bureau's white-collar crime unit. I need you and your colleagues to remain in the building. We're sending agents to escort you to a secure interview room. We're in the stairwell, I said, feeling trapped between floors. Building security told everyone to evacuate. That evacuation order was premature. Please return to the conference room immediately. Do not speak to each other about the case, do not access any electronic devices, and do not contact anyone outside the building. The line went dead, leaving us standing in the concrete stairwell like criminals caught trying to flee. Above us, I could hear doors opening and closing, voices calling out room numbers, the systematic sounds of a building being searched. This is insane, Marcus muttered as we climbed back up. Yesterday I was worried about quarterly performance reviews. Now I'm in the middle of a federal investigation because I lent my keycard to a friend. But when we reached the conference room, we found we weren't alone. A woman in a dark suit was sitting at the table, reviewing a stack of files that definitely hadn't been there when we left. She looked up as we entered, and her expression was unreadable. Ms. Rodriguez? I'm Agent Chen. Please, all of you, have a seat. As we settled around the table, I noticed she'd arranged Jake's personnel file, printouts of his LinkedIn connections, and what looked like financial records in neat stacks. The level of detail suggested they'd been investigating Jake long before I'd exposed him tonight. How long have you known? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop myself. Agent Chen's slight smile was answer enough. Mr. Morrison has been on our radar for several months. What we didn't have was proof of the systematic nature of his activities, or identification of his co-conspirators within the affected companies. Co-conspirators. The word hit me like a physical blow. We're not co-conspirators, Sarah said firmly. We're victims. Jake stole from us, lied to us, used our credentials without authorization. Ms. Chen, Agent Chen interrupted, we have records showing Pinnacle Media received payments from 3 shell companies over the past 18 months. Payments that correspond exactly with the timing of Mr. Morrison's intelligence gathering activities. The conference room went dead silent. Sarah's face cycled through confusion, realization, and horror. Someone in this company, Agent Chen continued, was getting paid for corporate secrets. And until we determine who, everyone in this room is a potential suspect. The blood drained from Sarah's face as Agent Chen's words sank in. That's impossible, she whispered. I would know if Pinnacle received unauthorized payments. Agent Chen slid a document across the table. These transfers were made to a subsidiary account opened 18 months ago. Pinnacle Strategic Consulting. Ring any bells? I watched Sarah scan the bank records, her confusion genuine. But something cold was forming in my stomach as I remembered Jake's helpful suggestions over the past year, streamlining our invoicing process, setting up new client billing systems, volunteering to handle administrative tasks that seemed beneath his pay grade. Jake had access to our accounting software, Tom said slowly. He helped migrate everything to the new system last year. He also handled new client onboarding, Marcus added. Set up payment processing for at least a dozen accounts. Agent Chen nodded grimly. Mr. Morrison was very thorough. The shell companies paid Pinnacle Strategic Consulting for market research services while Mr. Morrison simultaneously accessed and transmitted proprietary client information. Technically, the payments were legitimate business transactions. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Jake hadn't just been stealing, he'd been creating a paper trail that made Pinnacle Media look complicit. If federal prosecutors wanted to build a conspiracy case, they had documentation showing our company being paid for the exact intelligence Jake had been selling. But Sarah didn't know, I protested. None of us knew about that subsidiary account. That's what we're here to determine, Agent Chen replied. Corporate espionage cases often involve extensive internal networks. Someone had to approve the account setup, manage the transactions, provide Jake with the access he needed. Emma, who had been silent since we returned upstairs, finally spoke. What about the people whose careers Jake destroyed? Jennifer Martinez was fired because of his sabotage. Carlos took a demotion. Are they suspects too? Anyone who had access to compromised information and subsequently suffered professional setbacks could be considered either a victim or someone trying to establish an alibi, Agent Chen said matter-of-factly. Mr. Morrison was sophisticated enough to create layers of misdirection. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Mom called me crying. Says you're all over the news as either a hero or a criminal and she can't tell which. What the hell is happening? What was happening was that my attempt to clear my name had instead painted a target on everyone I worked with. The subsidiary account meant federal prosecutors could argue that Pinnacle Media wasn't a victim of corporate espionage, we were a willing participant in it. Agent Chen, I said carefully, when Jake called earlier, he said he wasn't working alone and wasn't calling the shots. He warned us about people who don't like loose ends. Her expression sharpened. What exactly did he say? I recounted Jake's warning while Tom pulled up the conference room's digital recording system. If this room records calls automatically, you might have the audio. Agent Chen was already on her radio, requesting technical support. Within minutes, 2 more agents appeared with equipment to extract the digital files. But as they worked, something Jake had said kept nagging at me. He'd been terrified, but not just of legal consequences, he'd been afraid of the people he'd been reporting to. People with enough power to scrub his entire online presence within hours of being exposed. Agent Chen, if Jake was just a middle manager in someone else's operation, aren't we in danger? If his bosses think we can identify them. That's why you're all staying here tonight, she interrupted. This building is now under federal protection. No one enters or leaves without authorization. Through the conference room windows, I could see news crews setting up for what looked like a long siege. The parking lot had been cordoned off, and I counted at least 8 federal vehicles. My phone rang again, my landlord, probably panicking about having a tenant under federal investigation. But as I reached to decline the call, Agent Chen grabbed my wrist. Don't answer that, she said sharply. We haven't verified that number yet. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Same number. How many people have this number? Agent Chen demanded. Family, close friends, work contacts. I trailed off as a horrible thought occurred to me. Jake had access to our employee directory. All our personal information. Agent Chen was already signaling to her team. We need to assume all personal data has been compromised. Phone numbers, addresses, emergency contacts, everything. As if summoned by her words, Marcus's phone started ringing. Then Emma's. Then Tom's. All unknown numbers. All calling simultaneously. Someone's making contact, Agent Chen said grimly, and they want to make sure they reach one of us. The phones kept ringing in an eerie symphony, 5 devices buzzing against the conference table like angry wasps. Agent Chen motioned for us to stay silent as she answered Tom's phone on speaker. Hello? The voice that came through was electronically distorted, robotic. You have something that belongs to us. This is FBI Agent Patricia Chen. Who am I speaking with? A pause, then what might have been laughter. Agent Chen, you're investigating corporate espionage. We're investigating loose ends. Jake Morrison was supposed to be a contained asset. My blood turned to ice water. Contained asset. They were talking about Jake like he was a tool that had malfunctioned. What do you want? Agent Chen demanded, but I could see her hands moving, signaling frantically to agents outside the room. The Morrison situation has created exposure we cannot tolerate. 5 people in that room have seen documentation that could compromise operations spanning multiple jurisdictions. Emma grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Through the distorted voice, the threat was crystal clear, we'd seen too much, and someone wanted to clean up the evidence trail permanently. If you're threatening federal witnesses, Agent Chen started, but the voice cut her off. We're not threatening anyone, Agent Chen. We're simply noting that Mr. Morrison's network was more extensive than your investigation assumes. For instance, how carefully have you vetted the agent assigned to this case? The words hung in the air like poison gas. Agent Chen's face went completely blank, but I saw her hand move instinctively toward her weapon. Pinnacle Media was never supposed to be exposed, the voice continued. It was a useful conduit for information laundering. Now it's become a liability that needs resolution. Resolution. They were talking about our lives like an accounting problem. The woman who started this cascade, Ms. Rodriguez, she believed she was exposing one stolen promotion. Instead, she's unraveled a supply chain that feeds intelligence to buyers in 17 countries. 17 countries. I felt the room spinning as the true scope of Jake's operation crystallized. This wasn't corporate espionage, it was international intelligence trafficking, and we were sitting in the middle of evidence that could topple governments. What do you want us to do? Agent Chen asked, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around us as more federal agents poured into the building. Nothing. You're going to continue your investigation, build your case against Mr. Morrison, and conclude that he was a lone actor who exploited corporate vulnerabilities for personal gain. The subsidiary accounts will lead you to dead ends. The international connections will appear to be isolated transactions. And if we find evidence that contradicts that narrative? Another pause. Agent Chen, 3 of your colleagues have been working this case with you. Are you absolutely certain none of them have financial interests in seeing this investigation reach particular conclusions? The accusation hit like a bomb. Agent Chen's face went white as she looked around the room, suddenly uncertain who she could trust even among her own team. You have 48 hours to accept our preferred narrative, the voice concluded. After that, Mr. Morrison's psychological profile suggests he might become despondent about his situation. Tragic, really, when people can't cope with the consequences of their actions. The line went dead, leaving us staring at each other in horrified silence. Jake wasn't just in danger, he was going to be eliminated to protect whatever network he'd been feeding information to. And if we didn't cooperate with the cover-up, we'd be next. Agent Chen was already barking orders into her radio, demanding immediate protection for Jake, but I had the sinking feeling we were already too late. Outside, one of the news crews was packing up their equipment. Someone had just called off the media circus, and that kind of power meant we were facing enemies way above our pay grade. Agent Chen's radio crackled with static, then a voice that made her face go completely white. All units, be advised, Jake Morrison was found 30 minutes ago. Apparent vehicle accident on Highway 94. No survivors. The conference room went dead silent except for the sound of Emma's sharp intake of breath. Jake was dead. Less than 2 hours after warning us about people who don't like loose ends, and he was gone. That's not a coincidence, I whispered, but Agent Chen was already moving, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in rapid, clipped sentences to whoever was on the other end. We need to evacuate this building immediately, she announced, snapping her phone shut. If they eliminated Morrison that quickly, this location is compromised. Compromised how? Tom demanded, but Agent Chen was already ushering us toward the door. Think about it, Marcus said, his voice tight with fear. Jake had building access for months. If he was reporting to someone with serious resources, they probably have blueprints, security codes, maybe even. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the conference room in an eerie red glow, but the message was clear, someone had just demonstrated they could control our environment. That's the building's main power grid, Sarah said shakily. The only way to cut power like that is from the electrical room in the basement, or from an external override, Agent Chen finished grimly. Someone with utility company access. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, elevator shafts. Fire exits. Parking garage. We know every way out. Stay calm and this ends quietly. I showed the screen to Agent Chen, whose face had gone from white to gray. They're not just watching the building, she said. They're inside the perimeter. What does that mean? Emma demanded, but I was starting to understand the horrible truth. It means Jake's network wasn't just about stealing marketing strategies, I said slowly. If they can cut power to a federal crime scene and control building access while FBI agents are present, they have people inside infrastructure systems. Maybe inside law enforcement. Agent Chen's radio buzzed with an incoming message, but when she tried to respond, nothing happened. Dead air. They're jamming communications, she said, her training finally overriding her shock. Standard protocol for containment operations. Containment operations. The clinical term for making people disappear. Tom was at the window, peering through the blinds at the parking lot below. The federal vehicles are leaving, he announced, his voice cracking. All of them. The news crews are gone too. That's impossible, Agent Chen said, moving to look over his shoulder. My team wouldn't abandon an active crime scene unless. She stopped mid-sentence, staring down at the nearly empty parking lot. Only our cars remained, looking suddenly very isolated under the emergency lighting. Unless they received orders from someone with authority over federal operations, I finished. Someone who could call off an FBI investigation with a phone call. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Agent Chen's number, but Agent Chen was standing right next to me, her phone clearly not in use. She motioned for me to answer and put it on speaker. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Agent Patricia Chen. The voice was identical, but the woman next to me had gone completely rigid. I need you to exit the building immediately and proceed to the parking garage. Come alone. I looked at the real Agent Chen, whose hand was now resting on her weapon. Who is this? I demanded. I'm Agent Chen, the voice on the phone replied calmly. The woman next to you is not who she claims to be. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire. I stared at the woman who'd been calling herself Agent Chen, looking for some tell that would reveal which version was real. Her federal ID looked legitimate, her knowledge of the case was comprehensive, but then again, Jake's credentials had seemed real too. Prove your Agent Chen, I said to the phone, while watching the woman beside me carefully. Badge number 47291, assigned to the Denver field office. I've been tracking Morrison's network for 8 months as part of Operation Clean Slate. The woman with you was inserted into this investigation 3 days ago. The woman next to me, real or fake Agent Chen, slowly reached into her jacket. My credentials are right here, she said calmly. Standard federal identification. But something about her movement made my skin crawl. Too smooth, too practiced, like she'd done this exact routine many times before. Don't, Tom said sharply. Don't reach for anything until we figure out what's happening. The woman's hand froze, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. The concern and professionalism vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating that made my stomach drop. Smart, said the voice on the phone. Ms. Rodriguez, the person with you is Elena Vasquez, former military intelligence, currently working for the same network that employed Morrison. She's been feeding them information about our investigation since day one. Elena, or whoever she was, smiled thinly. Clever. But you're trapped in a building with no power, no communications, and no backup coming. Even if I'm not Agent Chen, what exactly do you think your options are? Emma had been quietly backing toward the conference room door, but now she froze as Elena's attention snapped to her. Nobody leaves, Elena said, and this time her voice carried an authority that made it clear she was used to being obeyed. Sit down. All of you. What do you want? Sarah asked, but she was already moving back to her chair. Originally? We wanted Jake to keep his mouth shut and continue feeding us intelligence while you all remained oblivious. But Jake panicked, got sloppy, started making threats. Elena shrugged. Problem solved. She was admitting to Jake's murder like it was a minor scheduling issue. The voice on the phone spoke again. Ms. Rodriguez, can you get to a computer? We need you to access Jake's files before they're permanently deleted. Why? I asked, though I was already moving toward Tom's laptop. Because Jake was smarter than we gave him credit for. He kept insurance files, documentation of everyone he was working for, records of payments, evidence of the whole network. If we can access them before Elena's people wipe the servers. Elena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Jake's insurance files were deleted 40 minutes ago. Along with the backup drives, cloud storage, and that little flash drive he thought he'd hidden so cleverly. My heart sank. Without Jake's evidence, we had no proof of the broader conspiracy. It would be our word against a network with the resources to eliminate federal investigations and make people disappear. But then Marcus spoke up from where he'd been silently working on his phone. Elena, you might want to check your information sources. She spun toward him, hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. What? Jake didn't trust digital storage, Marcus said, his voice steadier than I'd expected. Last month, he asked me about physical document storage. Said he was working on a personal project that needed to be kept offline. Elena's professional composure cracked slightly. Where? Marcus held up his phone, showing a text message thread. Safety deposit box at First National. Box 2847. Jake gave me the access code last week, said if anything happened to him, I should make sure the contents went to federal authorities. You're lying, Elena said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Only one way to find out, Marcus replied. But that bank closes in 20 minutes, and if we're all dead, nobody's getting into that box for days. Might give real federal agents time to secure it. Elena's hand was fully on her weapon now, her calculation visible. She needed to know what Jake had stored, but she couldn't access it without keeping at least some of us alive. For the first time since this nightmare began, we might actually have leverage. Elena stared at Marcus for a long moment, her weapon half drawn, clearly calculating whether his story about the safety deposit box was worth the risk of keeping us alive. The silence stretched until my phone rang again, the real Agent Chen's voice crackling through with an edge of desperation. Buildings surrounded. SWAT's moving into position. Elena, you've got nowhere to go. That's when Elena made her mistake. She pulled out her own phone to make a call, and in that split second of distraction, Tom lunged for the conference room's panic button, the one connected directly to local police, bypassing all federal channels. The alarm was deafening, and within 30 seconds we could hear sirens approaching from multiple directions. Elena cursed, her careful control finally cracking completely. This doesn't end here, she snarled, backing toward the window. You think you've won something, but Jake's network spans continents. We'll just rebuild somewhere else. Maybe, I said, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. But Marcus was right about one thing, Jake was smarter than you gave him credit for. Elena paused, something in my tone making her wary. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, a video file that had been automatically uploading to cloud storage for the past hour. The conference room's recording system that Tom had activated to capture Jake's warning call had been running this entire time, documenting everything Elena had said. Jake wasn't the only one who believed in insurance policies, I said. Every confession you just made, every detail about the international network, every admission about Jake's murder, it's all recorded and already backed up to servers your people can't touch. Elena's face went white as the implications sank in. The sirens were getting louder, and through the window I could see local police cars flooding the parking lot, real officers with no connection to whatever federal channels Elena's network had compromised. She raised her weapon, but Emma had been quietly circling behind her with a fire extinguisher from the wall mount. The blast of chemical foam sent Elena stumbling forward, and Tom tackled her before she could recover. By the time the police reached our floor, we had Elena zip-tied with computer cables and her weapon secured. The real Agent Chen arrived 10 minutes later with a full federal task force, different agents, different badges, all verified through channels Elena's people couldn't have penetrated. The aftermath took months to sort out. Jake's safety deposit box turned out to be real, containing evidence that brought down a corporate espionage network spanning 14 countries. Elena's confession led to arrests in 3 federal agencies and the exposure of corruption that reached into Fortune 500 boardrooms. Pinnacle Media survived, barely, after Sarah agreed to cooperate fully with federal authorities and implement security protocols that made Fort Knox look casual. The company's reputation was damaged, but the publicity around our role in exposing the network actually brought in new clients who wanted to work with the firm that had stood up to international criminals. 6 months later, I got the promotion Jake had stolen from me. Not because of politics or manipulation, but because I'd proven I could handle pressure that most marketing coordinators never face. Emma transferred to a new firm in Seattle and sent me a Christmas card with her new promotion announcement. Marcus got commended by the FBI for his quick thinking and parlayed that into a job with a cybersecurity firm. And Jake? The real story of his death made national news when Elena's network was exposed. He was buried quietly, with only his parents attending. I didn't go to the funeral, but I did send flowers with a card that read, "Your insurance policy saved more lives than you knew." Sometimes I wonder if he planned it that way all along. So Reddit, AITA for exposing my coworker at his birthday party? Edit, thanks for the gold, and yes, I kept the laptop I used for the presentation. It's evidence in 7 federal cases now, ***. Edit 2, for those asking, the Henderson Electronics contract was reinstated after the full story came out. Turns out they appreciate companies that fight back against corporate espionage, ***.